Evening guys and girls, and welcome back to Ainch Gaming. Today we'll be continuing the class preview series, today with a distinct look at the Death Knight. Death Knight is seeing both a lot of change and very little change at the same time. We'll get to that when we actually get into the different specs and what's changing. They're trying to make sure that the Death Knight is still fulfilling its very separate spec identity, which is really cool to see, as they have been with other classes. They really want to reflect how the Death Knight works and make each of the different specs feel very fresh and very unique to that specific spec. In that vein, one of the main changes that's happening is that each of the different specs is getting their own disease that they'll be using. Blood will be getting its own, Frost will be getting its own, and Unholy will be getting its own, which is really cool to see. It just makes it a lot more sort of, if you're a Frost Death Knight, using Frost attacks. That's what you're doing. Your disease is frost based, everything is frost. So that's basically what they're going with there. So we're going to dive straight into it right now. Alright, and let's start off with the Blood Death Knight. They think that the core abilities for Blood should be feeling very familiar, though they have touched them up to bring added clarity to the spec. Each core ability now better leverages that sinister command of Blood and Bone to fuel your survivability. In particular, they've changed Death Strike to cost runic power now instead of runes, which they think results in a much more clear choice of resource expenditure. You can't lock yourself out from being able to heal if you spend a rune at the wrong time, and it also gives runic power generation a bigger impact. They've also, instead of rune tap, they're positioning Bone Shield to be the sort of primary complement to Death Strike for active defenses to better tie into the fantasy and also to provide a bit more flexibility. They've got a new attack, it's called the Marrow Rend, which allows you to rotationally generate Bone Shields. To provide gameplay contention between runes and of a single type, Blood Strike now generates additional runic power on top of the standard amount gained for spending a rune. So let's dive into the actual abilities of the spec. Right, to start it off, we'll be looking at an old favorite, Blood Strike. Going to cost 1 rune and of course melee range and instant. Instantly strikes the enemy, causing moderate physical damage and infecting the victim with Blood Plague, and it generates 10 bonus runic power. Blood Plague is a disease that deals minor shadow damage and heals the caster for 1% of their maximum health every 3 seconds for 30 seconds, which is looking really cool, especially to do with the spec. Next we have Marrow Rend, the new ability. It's going to cost you 2 runes and it's a melee range. Smash the target, dealing strong physical damage and generating 3 charges of Bone Shield. Bone Shield surrounds you with a barrier of whirling bones that reduces all damage you take by 25%. Each damaging attack consumes a charge, lasts for 30 seconds or until all of your charges are consumed. There's not really much new there. Next we have Death Strike, 40 runic power now, and it's of course melee range. Focuses dark power into a strike that deals strong physical damage and heals you 50% of all damage taken in the last 6 seconds. Minimum 7% of maximum health. If you're below 35% health when this is cast, all runic power is consumed, increasing the potency of the healing effect. The mastery is Blood Shield. Each time you heal yourself with Death Strike, you gain 40%, with mastery of course, of the base amount healed as a physical damage absorption shield. Also increases your attack power by 20% with mastery from typical gear. Next we have Death and Decay, a good old favorite since back in Warcraft 2. 1 rune, 30 yard range, instant, 30 second cooldown. Corrupts the ground targeted by the Death Knight, causing moderate shadow damage over 10 seconds to targets within the area. While you remain within the targeted area, your Blood Strike will hit all nearby enemies, which is quite cool. I don't think that was a feature from before, but I'll have to go back and check. It's been a while since I tried tanking because, well, I suck at tanking. Next we have Crimson Scourge, which is a passive. Your successful auto attacks on targets infected with your Blood Plague have a 25% chance to reset the cooldown on Death and Decay. So with that, it looks like Death and Decay is going to be a much more a thing that you'll be using a lot more, especially in terms of crowd control and making sure you get your threat. And then just as a quick look at a blood specific talent, we've got Bone Storm, which is looking really cool. 15 runic power per second, instant, and it's got a 1 minute cooldown, not a 1 second. It's basically a whirl of bone and gore batters nearby enemies 3 times per second to deal minor shadow damage, healing you for 1% of your maximum health per strike. While they have added one or two new things to it, blood spec is really seeming pretty similar to how it was. It doesn't seem as if it's had a lot of changes. However, it does feel to me that it is a lot more blood specific. It does look like it is very much setting out to be very immersive, and very much like when you're playing it, you know for a fact that you are a blood Death Knight, and that's pretty much what they're going for all the specs and all the classes, and it's really good to see that it's carried on to my favorite class. Yes, Death Knight is my favorite class, don't judge me. And now let's take a look at the Frost Death Knights. The mechanics of the Frost Death Knights are quite solid, and they don't think that they want to do too much to change that. You might notice that the core abilities that I'm going to list are largely familiar and you've all been using them. One small area where they found room for improvements, however, I'm not too sure if it's improvement, is in Killing Machine's passive interaction with the core rotation. While the automatic critical strikes it provides feel good, it's often better to ignore its proc in favor of spending resources as fast as you can, as your damage output suffers if you wait for different resources required for using Obliterate and Frost Strike to become available. Killing Machine now only affects Obliterate, and making wise use of its effect should feel more meaningful. I'm a little bit worried about that, seeing as Frost Strike is the main damage dealer, especially seeing as it's now all two-handed. So let's take a look and see what they might have changed to, well, make Frost Strike still do more damage, or to make Obliterate more of a damage dealer in not two-handed, dual-wielding Frost. And starting off with the core abilities, we'll be taking a look at Howling Blast, 1 rune, 30 yard range. Blast a target with Frigid Wind, dealing minor frost damage to that target and minor frost damage to all other enemies within 10 yards, infecting all targets with Frost Fever. That hasn't changed much, however. Frost Fever has a disease that deals minor frost damage and has a chance to grant the Death Knight 5 runic power every 3 seconds for 30 seconds, which is quite cool. It's going to give us a little bit more runic power to be able to use our abilities, which is really cool to see. Next we got Obliterate, which is getting a slight change to it. It's going to be using 2 runes as usual, melee range and instant, but now it's characterized as a brutal attack with both weapons that deals massive physical damage. This is what it seems to be the way in which they're trying to make Obliterate more useful to dual wielding Frost, seen as two-handed Frost is now completely out the window. So at the moment I think that's quite a cool idea. It's making it look better. However, I do like the idea of Frost Strike being my most high powered attack. But anyway, let's get on to Frost Strike. 20 runic power, melee range instant. Chill your weapons with icy power and quickly strike the enemy with both weapons, dealing massive frost damage. I don't think anything's changed there, except that Killing Machine no longer works with it. Next we have Rhyme. Passive, your Obliterate has a 45% chance to cause your next holding boss to consume no runes, generate no runic power, and deal 300% additional damage, which is, I'm not too sure about those numbers being there before, but it looks pretty cool. Killing Machine is passive, of course. Your auto attacks have a chance to make your next Obliterate automatically critical strike. We know it, we've seen it before, it's been around for a while. Remorseless Winter, 1 rune, instant, 30-second cooldown. Radiates extreme cold, dealing moderate frost damage to all enemies within 10 yards of you over 10 seconds, which used to be talent, so now it's a proper ability for us. Mastery is Frozen Heart, increases all frost damage done by 40% with Mastery from typical gear. And then quickly looking at a frost specific talent, we have Glacial Advance, 1 rune instant, 12-second cooldown. Summon glacial spikes from the ground that advance forward, each dealing moderate frost damage to enemies near their eruption point. I'll have to see this in beta when it finally comes out, but that actually sounds really cool and really like what a Frost Death Knight would do. Let me know in the comments below what you think about that move, but I'm really looking forward to using that one. So that's the Frost Death Knight. Overall, it still seems to be very much like a Frost Death Knight. I think that Obliterate should work much better now. I won't be so mad whenever I accidentally use my Killing Machine on it. So overall, I'm quite happy with all the changes. Let me know in the comments below, do you think they should have changed more, or do you think that you prefer the old way of doing it? And finally we get to Unholy. Unholy is receiving slightly more mechanical changes than Blood and Frost to better realign with their unique identity. They want to ensure that Unholy continues to be the spec with the most active use of diseases. In this regard, we recognize that Festering Strike lost its luster over time and have developed a new mechanic to ensure the ability remains integral to the Unholy rotation. So let's just quickly take a look at the abilities and see how that's going to work out. And first up we have Outbreak, which is now costing a rune. It's got 30 yard range and it's instant with a 6-second cooldown. It's going to now deal minor shadow damage and surround the target in a miasma lasting for 6 seconds that causes the target and all nearby enemies to be infected with virulent plague. A disease that deals moderate shadow damage every 3 seconds for 21 seconds. It erupts when the infected target dies, dealing moderate shadow damage split evenly between nearby enemies. The disease also has a 30% chance to erupt each time it deals damage, which is really cool. It's sounding like a very Unholy-like plague. And next we have Festering Strike, 2 runes, melee range, instant, deals massive physical damage and inflicts the target with 1 to 3 festering wounds. Festering wounds are a pustule-ridden lesion that may be burst by Scourge Strike, dealing moderate shadow damage and generating 3 runic power. So, Scourge Strike is 1 rune, melee range, and it's an Unholy Strike that deals strong physical damage and strong shadow damage. Triggers a single stack of Festering Wound if it is present on the target. So we'll have to see how that works out in beta, the correlation between those two, and just see exactly how it works. Death Coil is still there, 30 runic power, 40 yard range. Fires a blast of unholy energy at the target, causing strong shadow damage to the enemy and restoring 10 energy to your ghouls. So that's going to be your main runic power spender by the looks of things. Then you have Sudden Doom, which is a passive. Your auto attacks have a chance to make your next death coil cost no runic power. So kind of like Ram for the Frost Death Knight. Then we have Dark Transformation. It's instant with a 1 minute cooldown. Transform your ghoul into a powerful undead monstrosity for 20 seconds. The ghoul's abilities are empowered and take on new functions while the transformation is active. So it doesn't really look like much has changed there, but we'll have to see how if they decide to make any more different changes to it. Next we have Death and Decay. 1 rune, 30 yard range, instant, 30-second cooldown. Corrupts the ground targeted by the Death Knight, causing moderate shadow damage over 10 seconds to targets within the area. While you remain within the targeted area, your Scourge Strike will hit all nearby enemies. So it's working very similar to how it does for the Blood Death Knight. Mastery, Dreadblade. It increases all shadow damage done by 50% with Mastery from typical gear. And now a quick look at the Unholy specific talent, or the one that we have, is All Will Serve. It's very much a passive, and what it does is it makes your Raise Dead spell summon an additional skeletal minion, and its cooldown is removed. So what I'm kind of thinking there is when you use your Dark Transformation, will it only affect one of your Raised Deads in that regard, or will it affect both of them? Because in which case, nobody will not be selecting this talent. They will definitely need it. But let me know what your own thoughts are in the comments below. Once again, Unholy seems to be sticking very much true to its own form and very unique and separate from the other specs, except for the case of Death and Decay, which is very much shared between it and Blood. So far, I'm very much liking it. I'm still wondering if I'm hoping so, that the Necroblight playstyle is it going to be completely gone, because I know several people who will be quite bummed to see it go. But let me know in the comments below your own views on it, and maybe we'll find some stuff out. Who knows? I'll keep you up to date if anything new comes out about that. So overall, very little has changed in comparison to some of the other classes. However, it does feel a lot more immersive towards its own talents and own specs, which is what they're going for, and they seem to be very much pulling it off. I'm very excited to play it as soon as I get a chance to. It's looking really cool, and I'm still dying to get a chance to see what that Glacial Advance will look like. Thanks so much for watching the video, guys. If you enjoyed it, please rate it thumbs up and subscribe. Place a comment below giving your own views on it, and I will catch you next time.